Okay, so Nanomedicine Translation Hub. First of all, my name is Klaus-Michael Weltring from Gesellschaft für Bioanalytik Münster in Germany, and I'm a member of the Executive Board of the ETP Nanomedicine, which basically is behind this concept of a translation hub. And to explain a little bit what ETP Nanomedicine is, I thought I'd give you a brief intro into the ETP. The mission is basically to shape and support the European ecosystem on nanomedicine. It's not only defining R&D priorities, but also to mobilize stakeholders. And with stakeholders, we mean researchers, industry, regulators, so the whole system behind nanomedicine. And then, of course, try to facilitate knowledge transfer between these stakeholders. It was created in 2005, and it's an industry-led initiative, and together with the European Commission, we have about 150 members, and basically they're a mixture of industry, funding agencies, institutions, researchers, and so on. What is important is that this ETP not only looks into technology issues like nanodiagnostics or nanotherapeutics or regenerative medicine, but also on a horizontal basis looks at business possibilities, tries to figure out industrial clinical interfaces, of course also addresses the issue of toxicology and characterization. We think about education and training issues which need to be adapted. And last but not least, and that's very important, we also care about ethics and social impact of nanomedicine and public awareness. For these issues, we have working groups, and so we try to figure out a holistic view of the whole nanomedicine area. Accordingly, we have over the years produced several vision and research agendas and roadmaps and so on, which was taken up by the European Commission to draw calls for these different topics we have worked out. And the last, or the second last production or paper we wrote was a translation paper, which was a white paper. And in this white paper, we, for the first time, not only thought about research and development, but also how can we actually translate research into clinical use. And if you look at the value chain, there are researchers which come up with ideas, and then you have a proof of concept here. And then this area of preclinical development and early clinical development is basically the area where a lot of SMEs and research organizations are working before they do a proof of concept and then go to the clinical phase where several times big pharma or diagnostic industries take over. So the issue is in this area where we thought we need to establish several instruments to help SMEs and researchers to go from here to here. So we defined several parts of the model. One is the Translation Advisory Board. We also thought that dedicated grants for SMEs are an important part to finance the research and the development. The characterization of the material is important, and the scale up, of course. And I will go into a little bit of details of at least three of these elements: Translation Advisory Board, characterization, and GMP manufacturing. So what do we have to do when we go from the innovative projects from SME startups to go to this area to solutions for patients? Now, as I said, we thought mentoring is very important to get advice, because most of the people on this end do know anything about this end. So there's needs to be some mentoring in between. The material in a lab might be different and from the material which actually goes into the patient. So you need some characterization, and of course you need some manufacturing to get the amounts you need for the clinical use. So to do this, the EC basically sent out 3 calls, and we finally got projects which took care of the mentoring, characterization, and manufacturing. Let me start with the Nanomed tab, which is part of a project called ENATRANS. ENATRANS is a shortage for enabling nanomedicine translation. And basically, it's an information center. It gives you information on the ecosystem requirements, including clinics and investors, and it focuses a lot on regulation, reimbursement, access to clinics, and so on. And we had a webinar last week and last Friday, and if you missed it, you can find a YouTube link, and we can give it to you at the end of the webinar, or you can contact us to get this. We basically compiled this information on the website, and also wrote a compendium on regulation reimbursements, which gives you a guidance how these systems operate in Europe, but also internationally, like in the US, Korea, Japan, China, and so on. Now, an important part of this ENATRANS project is the Translation Advisory Board. And you can see here the members of the board, and I can tell you that most of them are really experienced industry people, so who actually know what industry and what regulators really expect from you from the project. So they have this experience and are willing to give this experience to entrepreneurs and SMEs. So the process is basically that you send in an application, you get some written feedback, and then if the Translation Advisory Board members think it's interesting, you get a 2-hour individual session with these advisors. And this already gives you an idea if your project has a chance to really move to the clinic. If it's very promising, there might be some guidance to get to the second stage, where you really, from some of the experts, or 1 or 2, you get really business support for your project. And so far we had, I think, 3 sessions, face-to-face sessions, and with quite a number of projects, and we had some successes. But details from this you will get in the next Friday, on the 15th of December at 11 a.m. when the people running this Translation Advisory Board, and even a member from the advisory board, will be available at 11 a.m. for a webinar if you are interested in this Translation Advisory Board process. Now, the second point, as I mentioned, was basically the characterization of the material you want to put into the clinic. And the project, which was started about 3 years ago, was the European Nanomedicine Characterisation Laboratory. The idea was that so far, if you want to put a product on the market, you at the moment have to contact different CROs, different organizations to get your physical, chemical, biological, or in vivo characterization of your material. So it's a non-integrated providers, it's time consuming. And the idea was, okay, let's do a multidisciplinary center, which with central coordination, so that you, for example, as a researcher, get contact to a core expert teams, which actually look at your material and then decide what kind of physical, chemical, and so on characterization you need to have. So it would be much more efficient and better managed. Behind this are the institutions you can see on this side. So from Norway down to Italy, we have several partners. It's a decentralized institution. What is important is that these partners in Europe also have a US partner. It's the EUNCL, which already operates for 10 years now and has a lot of experience in the field. So we were lucky that that the experts from the US, who really closely work together with the FDA, gave us the access to their assay systems. So we were able to copy paste basically the assay systems to Europe. So now we can basically provide, if you want, global support through these two institutions on the characterization. So it would start basically with pre-cleaning of your material. So the most important part would be looking for endotoxins. The next point is then to get a full physicochemical characterization to see if your product is homogeneous, if it's just has a single size, and these kind of things, what the surface morphology is. And then, of course, we will have access to a complete set of in vitro hematology, immunology, and cytotoxicity assays. So looking at oxidative stress, complement activation, and so on. If all of this looks fine, then we even have the possibility to go in vivo, mostly rodent models, to see at biodistribution, immunogenicity, and pharmacokinetics. Now, the end of the process, we have a final report. And this final report basically gives you the data to make you confident for your investor or even for the regulators that your material meets all the requirements necessary to go finally to the clinic. So this whole system is free of charge because it's a European project, and you can basically apply constantly, and we have certain cutoff dates where our core expert teams and some external advisors look at your proposal and then decide how to proceed with your proposal, how to proceed with the material, check with you in a face-to-face meeting if your material is ready to go through this process. And the limiting factors mostly are the right or enough amount of it, stability of the product, and so on. So I think this is an important addition to help you to get your product on the market. Last but not least, as I mentioned before, the next challenge, of course, is to get enough of your material, because usually in the lab there are milliliters or milligrams of the material, but to go for clinical studies, you need liters or grams of the material. And this upscaling process is certainly a challenge in itself, but this has also been done under GMP, so good manufacturing practice conditions. And the EC has established 3 pilot lines in this regard: Nanopilot, Makiviga, and Nanofactoring, which all have different focus points. So depending on your material, if it's a metal or a polymer or a lipophilic product, you will go to one of these manufacturing pilot lines. So these are the 3 kind of projects which have been initiated by the EC to help entrepreneurs, SMEs, to go from the product, from the lab to the industry. And of course, this is only parts of the issues, because the translation, as you can see here, is a jungle of all kinds of regulations, of all kinds of requirements you have to meet. And it's comparable to a metro plan of a big city, if you want. And what we try with these 3 with the 3 projects I illustrated to you is to kind of straighten it out a little bit and put it into pieces which are connected to each other. So if you want to take the translation advisory board as the beginning, then you would go to this board, would have a face-to-face meeting, and then you would get advice. And depending on the quality, you even might get coaching. Now, if your product is promising, then you might transfer it to the European Nano-Characterization Laboratory. And here, first of all, we will sign a non-disclosure agreement so that you can be sure that your data are confidentially treated. There is a process of proposals and evaluation. And after that, there is a material transfer, which allows you and us to really work on the material, on the candidate material, which then goes to the processing, so pre-screening, physicochemical, in vitro, and so on. We might even have to look at some other methods which are currently not in the characterization cascade. And at this point, we would certainly also try to get feedback from the regulators to see what kind of issues might be addressed with new method. So at the end, you get a final report, as I said, which then is a promising report, or yeah, a report, which then should enable you to get the money and be confident to go to the pilot lines. So take your lab product, and then at the end you end up with a clinical batch, which comes through these different routes depending on your material, depending on what kind of route you would have to take, and you have to check with these 3 pilot lines if your product is to go to one or the other line. Okay, so this is what we think it will help you to get your product on the market, get the advice, get the characterization, and get the manufacturing towards the clinical studies. And the rest then, of course, is a different matter, different regulations, and different amount of monies and experience needed. But at least to this point, you will be able to get through. Now, if you need more information, there are different sources. One is the ETP Nanomedicine, of course, where you get the links to all these projects, but you can also contact the projects directly. One is the EUNCL, and the other one is the ENATRANS. I didn't put the internet links of the 3 pilot lines, but you can get them through, for example, the ETP Nanomedicine. At these pages, you can download reports, documents, and also find further information, especially if you look at the ENATRANS page, where we have a really elaborate description of the regulator and reimbursement system, where you can click through and get a lot of links to partners and players in this whole game. Of course, if you get lost, you can also contact the secretariat, etpnanomedicine.eu, so that you get help here and get experience. Well, that's it for the moment. I thank you for your attention, and I'm ready for taking questions, of course. Are there any questions? No questions.
Klaus?
Yeah.
It's not a question, but just a few comments. First of all, thank you for the presentation. My comment is that as you know even better than me, we've been trying to explain the hub as the most convenient way, which is explaining the tab, then the EUNCL, then the pilot lines. But I think that one of the 2 best achievements of last year was first, let's say, an upscale in the yield of the hub, with more than 100 projects that have been already evaluated, which is quite a nice result during the period of ENATRANS. And second, that we have started to really interconnect the services. So it means that if by some reason someone is interested by characterization and starts by contacting the EUNCL, indeed you will be asked also to contact the Nanomed tab if the people from the EUNCL think that you could benefit from the advice of the experts. So now I think it's really even better interconnected and not linear, but really a hub. So this is my first comment, and I think that it was one of the biggest challenge. So this is concrete. This is not just about giving some info about the other services, but maybe exchange some recommendation between the services with full respect of confidentiality agreements indeed. And my second comment is more general, is that maybe you have a deeper view than I have in that sense. But I think that we are quite the only industry that is represented by an ETP in Europe that have such an integrated system of help of the best innovative projects. So can you comment on that, please?
Yes, I also have this feeling, and you are quite right, and that's why I put up this second last slide again. This is, of course, not a direction from left to right, but also from right to left, so that you can change at each point. I think what is really an advantage over almost all in the other industries is that we, for example, in the tab have experts which not only work for money as consultant, but which are really dedicated to the project. And I think it's really unique that you have such a mixture of experts. You not only have, let's say, retired people from industry, which have a lot of experience, but you also have, like Laurent Levy, some active SME people who ran through all the ups and downs of putting something on the market. So the broadens, or the scope of experience is really big and covers almost every issue there is. And therefore, I think really the three elements we have here are really covering completely the most critical phase of a development, because once you make it to the clinical phase 2, for example, then at least the SMEs, most of them made it to a point where you get a lot of investors and a lot of interest and a lot of help from CROs, for example. So I think we really managed to cover the valley of death, as people would say, from lab to clinical phase. And therefore, you're right. I think it's a very good example, also maybe for other industries, to set up to help technologies going to the market.
Thank you, Klaus. And an extra comment, if there is no question, is that as you know, we are trying to expand that vision to a broader view, which is not only nanomedicine, but other key enabling technologies for healthcare. And let's say all emerging, virtually every emerging medical technology that is trying to be developed in Europe. So I think that this global scheme of the Translation Hub, which is just how to help the best innovative projects, how to help them concretely by using also public funding in a different way, which is not only support to R&D, but also support to services, trying to finish the work that classical R&D teams cannot do by themselves. I think that this vision is really expandable to the other CATs. And as you know really well, we were trying to do this in Nobel, which is the new CSA after ENATRANS, and also in the much broader task force, which is ESTER indeed. That I think that the global mission of each organ of the hub is translatable in another technology, which is advising, characterization, let's say preparation to clinical tests, and then upscale in manufacturing. So it's going to be challenging, but I think it's a great challenge to really concretely help medtech to happen in Europe.
Well, I think the EC, even by itself, was closely looking at how these projects will evolve, if it makes sense. So I think by proving the success rate you just mentioned, looking at 100 projects, for example, is showing even to the EC that if you want to have key enabling technologies really moving to the market, you need these three elements. And we have shown that you need the interrelation of these three elements in a way we have set it up, that it is successful, because one in itself is always missing the other two. So I think it really makes a lot of sense to have these three in line. If you go from left to right or right to left, it doesn't really matter, but they should be there, and you should get the oh, there's somebody calling. Hi, sound.
There's a newcomer that should mute his or her mic, please.
Okay. Well, if there are no further questions and no comments, I think we can terminate the presentation. It will be available on YouTube, and we will convert it. So in this sense, I would like to thank you for your attention. I hope you can spread the news, and if you want to have the link to the video of this session, you can go to the Secretariat at ETP Nanomedicine, where you can get the link, or you can go to ENATRANS or all the other pages I just mentioned, or you have here, so that you can take another look or a second look, or can recommend it to the people around you who want to know about this, need to know about these 3 elements. So thank you a lot, and have a nice weekend, and that's it. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Klaus. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Klaus.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.